Celebrating life. Imagine being in church and celebrating. See, life is so darn good when we allow ourselves to recognize the greatness and the grandeur of life. There's something that resides inside of us that when we give it permission to come out, and we say, come out and be who you can be, but use me as your vessel to express through. When that joy, when that happiness, when that glad tidings, it shares itself and pushes itself through us, man, can we experience the goodness of life. The goodness of life is what lifts us up and allows us to see the greatness in each other. You see, each one of us is a beautiful, whole, complete being of spirit, of love, housed in this thing called a body. And when we walk around, carry it around, we are honoring the reverence of that which we came from. Do we honor the reverence in each other when we greet each other and look them in the eyes and say, hello, good morning, I see the goodness in you. I'm not just thinking it, I see it, I sense it, I feel it. So, what I want to talk to you today about is wholeness. With a W, whole. Not H, as in whole. Boy, I got to be careful on that one. Don't want to go there. You guys probably wouldn't care. So wholeness. How much of our moments of our life, of our days of our life, of weeks, of years, have we went through believing we are less than whole? How many of us have believed at times in our life that we needed somebody else, something else in our life to make us whole? That we needed a relationship when we were single, or when we were married, or in a partnership. We still needed more to make us whole, and we've been looking to keep filling that void. And the bummer is we're looking in the wrong place. As soon as we look outside of ourselves for wholeness, we will always come up a little bit empty. Where do we go to find wholeness? We go to find wholeness in that place that there's never been a doubt that we're whole. You see, there is a consciousness that permeates inside of us. And it has never, ever held us in anything less than the most ideal, whole, complete, perfect expression of itself. It's us on a human level that sees us as less than, of not as great as. But when we accept our wholeness inside of us, and we know that we are in the mind of the universal intelligence that put this 30 to 50 trillion cells together that we somehow call a body or a human being, that in there is the absolute truth etched into every one of those cells that we are whole, complete in and of ourselves. And that wholeness, when we really grasp it, and when we embrace it, and when we can hold it, and when we don't need to look out here to touch it, but we have it inside every time we take a moment and we just go, ooh, man, I'm whole. And I'm okay if you don't think I am. That's what wholeness does. I'm okay if you don't love me as much as I would like you to. Do you know how weak sometimes our wholeness can be? Oh, somebody didn't love me. Somebody didn't act or want or behave the way I needed them to. So now I feel less than. That's not wholeness. It's, hey, when I'm anchored in that presence, when I know I am whole, you're okay to be however you need to be. If you want to walk around feeling wounded, feeling less than, feeling not as great as, not owning your wholeness, that's okay with me because I own mine. And the only thing that we always need to be aware of is there's only one person that can be responsible for your wholeness. One. Amen. And that's you. You see, when we deepen our wholeness in that infinite relationship with that universal intelligence, and I just happen to like to call it God, because I don't have any weird thoughts around the word God. I've called God my whole life. And I never thought of it as something sitting up there keeping records of what I don't do or do. Or when I make a do. The things we call that thing, with a baby, with Liberty now, all the things. And I've never seen somebody so excited to take a poop. Daddy, 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 look, look. And then we have her potty chair in the living room, and so we have a couple of them scattered around. Just go anywhere, we don't care. So it's really kind of handy when guests come in and you got this little potty chair. It's right there, go ahead. We'll change it. But then when I carry it with her into the toilet, we take it to the toilet, the doo-doo. And she stands there and she goes, and we put it in and she goes, yay! Daddy, you do it. And now she's gone to call him, she just skipped the dad phase, now it's David. It's the strangest thing to have this little 2.5-year-old kid sitting in the living room. David. The other day we came home from camping, she's sitting in her little chair there in the living room, she's sitting on it, she's kind of lounging on it, you know, one of these little foam chairs. She's kind of laying in the thing, she got her one leg up on the side, and I'm carrying everything in from camping, and she goes, how's it going, David? Honest, I thought she was smoking. I wanted to get her a beer. It's unique. Wholeness. Wholeness. That's what we're looking as we enter into our final part of the 5th step today, is growing in spiritual self and relational trust. And so our 5 steps that we looked at, or our 4 steps that we've looked at, in step 5, for those of you that are joining us for the first time since the beginning of the year, we have combined the 12 steps of AA along with the 12 promises of AA, combining them with 12 spiritual principles of the universe, along with 12 action steps. And we put them together to create one of the most dynamic healing programs for you to embark on, to partake of. And what my job up here is to encourage you to do this. And we went through a really heavy step. I want you to get that heavy. And I'm not sure how many of us that have been here since I've been talking about this have really been concentrating or committing to working on this. When we talked to the very first one, admitted to God, to ourselves, to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Why do we want to do this? Because those are the things that have convinced us on a human level that we are not whole. This is about unburdening ourselves. It's about dumping out all of those thoughts, getting them out of ourselves, writing them down, sharing them with God, reading that list to God, and knowing that within yourself, here are your mistakes. You are human. If you are human and you have walked here for more than a day or two on earth, you have made a mistake. Get over yourself. If you think you've never made one, we all make mistakes. It's part of our learning classroom here on this thing called Earth. It's no accident that we're outside the eye of the Milky Way. Kind of got cast over to the side here. You go over here, don't cause too much trouble over here. When you get a little better, you can migrate towards that center spiral light. I don't know, that always makes sense in my head. But we're here on this school classroom called Earth. And what part of our lessons of being human is, what do we do with our mistakes? Do we hold them in and hold them against ourselves or others for a lifetime? Or 80 years ago, take Bill Wilson's advice from 80 years ago and learn to dump them. So because by releasing them at the time of his creating these 12 steps, is it believed that by releasing these would let go of all the reasons that convince us that we're not whole. And it's because of those thoughts of not being whole that we drink, that we want to buy things to fix that lack of whole understanding of our wholeness, of embracing our wholeness, or we want to numb it out with drugs or the other 170 addictions. The reason we practice any of these unhealthy behaviors or habits or addictions because we don't believe we're whole. So what are we doing to open ourselves so that we can fully embrace our wholeness? This is a proven step that's been used for years. That when we can make a list, and we're not asking you to share it with your florist, unless your florist happens to also work as a therapist, which I would question. Somewhere there's a really good punchline, and I'm just missing it at the moment, but don't worry. So that's what this step was about, and it takes integrity to do this. See, when we're not practicing integrity, we just go, okay, well, I'm going to walk around with all these burdens inside of my head. And then what happens is we take those burdens because we haven't dumped them, because we haven't emptied them out in a healthy way. Then we empty them out inside internally, and it manifests in imperfect health. Or we dump them into our relationships, or into our family, or into our, worse yet, into our children's lives. So is it better to write it down, dump it, share it with another human being that can handle it, that knows what to do, that is equipped to handle somebody sharing their biggest faults and mistakes? Or is it better that we get the side effects of it, that and how it comes out covertly is that because the person hasn't done that work, they keep dumping it on those around us. And that doesn't remind those around us of their wholeness. So that's the purpose of this. And it takes integrity to do that. When I did mine about 4 years ago, and I went through everything I'd done in my life, and I shared it with my sister. Because my sister has been around me for all my life, 50 years. She never once, ever questioned who I am, in spite of whatever I've done. And I went through my entire list, and I'm crying, and I'm sharing, and I'm pouring my guts out to her. And you know what she said when I was all done? Well, that's not that bad. I thought, wow, what I'd made up in my head and how terrible it had sounded, because she knew everything I'd done along the line. There's a few details that she didn't know that I kind of added up in that old list. But I've always been really open. I have people in my life that I can share about anything with in my life. She knew my whole history. She's known every mistake I've made in relationships, everything. And I put it all together, gave it to her. Not that bad. But boy, how many of us are like that? We keep it all inside and we think, oh, it's so bad, I just can't share it. I'll give you my sister's number. Lives in Reading. You don't even need to know where it is. Just call her. Not that bad. Imagine if that's what we did with all of the worst things in our life that we've ever done, that we hold and punish and beat ourselves up with so long, and that we don't allow it because of it, that we keep it. It keeps us from loving others. It keeps us from being loved. It keeps us from having fun. It keeps us from being passionate. It keeps us from being creative. And that because we have so much fear about sharing it with another human being, and then when we share it with another human being, they say it's not that bad. She's not overly spiritually grounded by any means. And she's got her own issues. So what? What a truthful statement. What a powerful statement. I couldn't have asked any better. I'd have called some minister, friends that have been in the business, in this spiritual stuff for a long time. They had given me this whole big scenario. Blah, 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 blah. Not that bad. Sounded a lot better. So what I'm saying, no matter what you have inside of you, no matter what you have inside of you, it's not that bad. Do you get that? Yeah. So please don't let your tiny little ego that sometimes can be so big and control us and talk us into, it's so big, the world can't handle it. Oh, really? We live in a universe. Get this universe now is being stretched by Stephen Hawking in his latest thesis or theory is that we live in a universe. When I'm talking about that, I'm talking about not the Milky Way galaxy, that's what we live within, but we're talking about a universe that has 200 billion galaxies like the Milky Way that are at least 200 billion, that each contain at least 200 billion stars, moons, and planets. Right, Stephen Taylor? He's the one that told me the information. Stephen Hawking just did a movie, a documentary with Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman. That's the latest research. I've been saying 125 billion galaxies. I was off by 75 billion. You're talking about stuff, that's the universe we live in. You think that universe can't handle your little list? Really? Really? Let's talk. Do you see how silly we are when it comes to our healing? Tell God. Just go stand on the shoreline, preferably with nobody around. You know, it'd be a little embarrassing, you know, if a whole crew of bicyclists are standing behind you. Find that space and just tell God. Because you're telling yourself. And who's that one other person? Because what we do when we do that is we are growing in our spiritual, self, and relational trust. Joel Goldsmith. How many have heard of Joel Goldsmith? Important for me to know. Okay. Joel Goldsmith is one of the greatest contributors to New Thought. Okay? He was born in 1892, lived to 1964, a monumental teacher of practical mysticism. Books, The Infinite Way, have been read by millions. He devoted most of his life to the discovery and teaching of spiritual principles, which he founded and called The Infinite Way. One of the early, powerful pioneers of New Thought and teachers. So Joel Goldsmith, one of his famous quotes that has been read for many, many years is, "The world is not in need of a new religion, nor is the world in need of a new philosophy. What the world needs is healing and regeneration. The world needs people who, through devotion to God, are so filled with the Spirit that they can be instruments through which healings take place, because healing is important to everybody." Now, I took one of his quotes, one of his paragraphs, and I put it into 3 quotes. Because this is why it's so important that we're developing our relational trust and spirit within ourselves and with those around us. And what he says is, "Let us suppose that we desire to meditate, but the human mind is in such a turmoil that we do not find ourselves immediately in a state of quiet and peace. Instead of attempting to blank the mind and blot out these disturbing thoughts, we use the mind and turn to Scripture or to some other book for inspiration." The opening line there is what I love. "Let us suppose that we desire to meditate, but the human mind is in such a turmoil that we do not find ourselves immediately in a state of quiet and peace." Is that true? Yes. So that's why we resist meditation. Okay? So that's what I want you to understand. And you know what? That's normal. That's why about 99.9% of the people don't regularly meditate on earth. That's why. Because we turn within and we got all this stuff. What's all that stuff? Those burdens. All of that unhealed stuff permeating around there. So that's the idea. Make the list. Get it out. So then here's what he says next. Because what many of us will do is just what he's talking about here. When we're coming into New Thought, self-help, spirituality for the first time is, well, we hear about affirmations. So we say, now let us see how this operates in the use of such a question as, "Be still and know that I am God." The student that has learned to rely on the affirmations would repeat this over and over again. Is that true? That's what we've been taught before? So we're sitting there and what we're doing is we're being still and knowing that we're God, but we're sitting on top of all those burdens. So how do you be still and know that you are God when you're sitting on top of those burdens? Then it says, and then we're told, just repeat the affirmation. The student is to rely on the affirmations, would repeat over and over again. Be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. That should solve it, right? Instead, until they reach a point of self-hypnosis. And in this state, temporarily found themselves still. Temporarily. So slide 3. He says to repeat continuously, to be still and know that I'm God, is nothing but suggestive therapy. Nothing but affirmation and denial used to hypnotize oneself. It is not a spiritual practice. It is not spiritual power. Some people have become so hypnotized through the use of such an affirmation that they actually believe that they, as a human being, are all of God. Are God. We're a part of. We're a very small part. Look how big the universe is. Everything that is within that universe is a part of God. So I am no more important than any other living form here on this earth. But when we're just sitting there, be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. Well, what do I do with all that stuff that keeps popping into my head? And all I know is to keep affirming and keep affirming and keep affirming and keep affirming. Yeah, you will get moments of stillness, but it's not whole and complete stillness. So that's the intention of what he says. And to further read from his book, The Art of Meditation, it says, then what he further says, he says, be still and know that I am God. What does that mean? Of course you know, Joel, that you are not God. So he's talking to himself right here. So what does this mean? It says, I I, that internal essence that I was speaking about at the beginning of my talk here with you. I am God. That's the part that's God. Not the Joel in God. That is quite different. Yes, I and the Father are one. God is in the midst of me, is mighty. I and the Father are one. Yes, Joel and I, the Father, are one. The Father and Joel are one. Right where I am, God is. Closer than breathing, nearer than hands or feet. Be still, Joel, because the I in you is God. You do not have to seek protection, help, or healing anywhere else. I am with you. Be still and know that I is your protection, your salvation, and your security. So you hear the difference? It's not me, the person. It's the I presence of the infinite presence that is within me. And that's what we want to be still and know that is God. That is divine being. At the core of our essence is that eternal wellness of God, of spirit, of goodness. And we know that as we grow in our awareness and in our relationship with God, that we find many ways to extend grace, to extend love to those around us. And it can show up in a multitude of ways, even in a third grader. It says, come with me to a third grade classroom. There is a 9-year-old sitting at his desk, and all of a sudden there is a puddle between his feet and the front of his pants are wet. He thinks his heart is going to stop because he cannot possibly imagine how this has happened to him. It's never happened before, and he knows that when the boys find out, he will never hear the end of it. And when the girls find out, they'll never speak to him again as long as he lives. Have you ever had something like that happen and you think, oh, the world has just come to an end? The boy believes his heart is going to stop. He puts his head down and prays this prayer. Dear God, this is an emergency. I need help. 5 minutes from now, I'm dead meat. He looks up from his prayer, and here comes the teacher with a look in her eyes that says, he has been discovered. As the teacher is walking toward him, a classmate named Susie is carrying a goldfish bowl that is filled with water. Susie trips in front of the teacher and inexplicably dumps the bowl of water in the boy's lap. The boy pretends to be angry, but all the while is saying to himself, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Now, all of a sudden, instead of being the object of ridicule, the boy is the object of sympathy. The teacher rushes him downstairs and gives him gym shorts to put on while his pants dry out. All the other children are on their hands and knees cleaning up around his desk. The sympathy is wonderful. But as life would have it, the ridicule that should have been his has been transferred to someone else, Susie. She tries to help, but they tell her to get out. You've done enough, you klutz. Finally, at the end of the day, as they are waiting for the bus, the boy walks over to Susie and whispers, you did that on purpose, didn't you? Susie whispers back, I wet my pants once too. When we're whole and complete and aware that the God presence is in everyone, we walk with grace. And may God always help us see the opportunities that are around us and allow us the opportunity to do good. What can we learn from Susie? When we're whole, we don't look at that situation and go, ha, 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 look what happened to you. When we're whole, we look at it and go, what could I do to ease this person's burden? What can you do when you love yourself to ease yourself of your burdens? God is there to help us, but we have to give it the opportunity. When we strengthen our relational trust in God and self, then we see opportunities such as this to extend ourselves in a way of grace and love and compassion. Thank God for the Susies on earth. May we pray.